Hello, I'm James Hadley, Executive Director of Musical Theatre Network, and thank you so much for joining us for this, the third in our Creating Consciously series of panel discussions. I hope you're enjoying either joining us live or catching up on this session on YouTube afterwards. Tonight's session is looking at musical theatre and theatre generally, and neurodiversity, how to be more inclusive of both creatives and audiences experiencing neurodiversity. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation that is being chaired, as with the previous panels, by the lovely Meg McGrady. Before handing over to Meg, just to say I'm Executive Director of Musical Theatre Network. We bring people and resources together to improve opportunities for new musical theatre. Check out our website if you've not come across us before. We'll soon be traveling all around the UK doing Beam Pitching Days. And one of our big events coming up soon, do join us live if on the live stream if you're watching this in advance of the 18th of September, because on that date we're doing an event called Regenerate, which is a sharing of lost or cut songs from past musicals by some of the greats of musical theatre currently living around the world. So American, continental Europe and UK writers who have contributed these songs as a pay it forward gesture to raise money to pay current and emerging musical theatre freelancers who will be selected to share their work in the forthcoming Beam Musical Theatre Showcase, which is happening in May next year. But yes, that's Regenerate on the 18th of September at 7 p.m. If you want to join us for that, just have a Google and you will find all the details, or look at the MTN or MMD website. All the information is there. Oh, and I always forget, apologies, just to audio describe, I am a white male with very little hair on the top of my head, but a little bit on the side, often blushing, high color in my face, with a beard, and I'm wearing a gray shirt and a dark gray t-shirt, sitting in my kitchen with some cream colored cupboards and a workbench behind me. And yeah, that's me, my brief introduction. Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Meg, who is chairing tonight's discussion.
Hello, everyone. I am Meg. I use they, them pronouns, and I am a white, thin, androgynous looking human with short shaved brown hair, and I'm wearing a white t-shirt and some green fox dungarees that have like little foxes all over them. And I'm going to be chairing tonight. Before we kick it off and introduce our panelists, I'm just going to give a little bit of housekeeping. We're going to have a break probably around 45 minutes into this discussion, because we are all neurodivergent, and we're also probably, some of us will be using stim toys throughout, which is totally welcome. To cover some real basics, just some terminology, neurodivergence is an umbrella term used for someone whose brain processes and thinks of the world differently from the majority of typical people. It covers a range of conditions from autism, ADHD, dyslexia, dyspraxia, Tourette's, just to name a few. There's a lot under this umbrella. Neurotypical is a term used for people who are not neurodivergent, and neurodivergence is a very broad term when it comes to this discussion. So I just want our audience to understand we cannot possibly cover every single intricacy and every single experience in this one discussion. Every single neurodivergent person is completely different in their needs. And also I just want to say that as well to our panelists, to say use and bring your neurodivergence in whatever ways that is comfortable for you. And also, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm also autistic and dyslexic. But now to introduce our wonderful, wonderful panelists. And I'm going to first of all pass to Erin.
Hello, everyone. My name is Erin Emphis, and I am a white, non-binary person in my early 30s. I use they, them pronouns, and for the purposes of this discussion, am disabled, and I also have autism and ADHD. I have short, dark hair, and I'm wearing a dark blue shirt with stars and kind of the soul, like sort of astrological zodiac-y system on it. Thank you.
Amazing. And I'm just going to pass to JJ.
Good evening, everyone. My name's JJ. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm a man in my middle 20s and I identify as autistic with ADHD as well. I'm wearing a grey t-shirt. I've got sort of coiffed brown hair, brown eyes and brown eyebrows, and I'm in my bedroom, which is just cream coloured walls and a bed in the background.
Amazing, thank you. And finally, I'm going to pass to Max.
Hiya, I'm Max Alexander Taylor. I'm an actor and writer. I use he, him pronouns. I'm in my late 20s, though I like to think I look a bit younger. I'm a white cis male with blue eyes, and I'm wearing a cap to disguise my receding hairline.
Amazing, thank you all so much, and thank you all for being here. To kick us off, I want to start with a kind of slightly lighter question, which is, when have you felt most welcomed in a theatre setting as a neurodivergent person, and how can that be emulated or reproduced in theatre in the future? I don't think I have any, I don't have many examples of this myself, but I am curious to hear what our panelists will say.
I think a big part, oh, it's Erin speaking, by the way. A big part of deciding who to spend my money with and who to spend my energy on, sort of traveling to a venue to see something, requires a lot of forward planning. So I'll often spend a lot of time looking at a venue's website or a production company's website. And one of the things that always ticks my boxes is seeing that they've had some kind of awareness or integration, so it's a hard word to say, integration training that's advertised on their website or on their social media, or it's clear from their social media that they are an inclusive organization. And also one of the things that often helps me to decide who to spend my money with is looking at a production company's diversity policy. If they don't have one, I then obviously I'm not going to give them my money. But generally, if a diversity policy is obviously well thought out and inclusive, then that's the first step in me saying, yeah, I'm going to go to this venue and this is somewhere I'm going to feel safe and this is someone that I want to give my money to.
Amazing, thank you for that, Erin. This is Meg speaking. I finally thought of one that I had for myself. This is just very personal to me. I've always been told, not always been told, but it's always been presumed of me that I am a bad actor just because I am not a good actor of being neurotypical. I'm a great neurodivergent actor, I think. But as part of that recently, when I was doing a production, and I remember the director gave me feedback at one point just saying how I was a really good actor, and that I know that they didn't know that would mean so much to me, but it really did. So that's just a little thing that I just thought of right now. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to say?
Yeah, this is Max speaking. I've got kind of two, I suppose, that stick out as someone kind of presenting their neurodivergence in these scenarios, but they're always in companies when the show was specifically about, in my case, autism. And what kind of went alongside that was just an ear to listen. So if you said it, people would nod and smile, and they'd be obvious that they're accepting in it. And again, I think the advantage with those two things was there was the presumption that we were there to tell positive stories about autistic people. And as a result, I went in assuming that everyone would be, thumbs up to that. And therefore it had a knock-on result of me reading them and taking something very positive from it. So when the subject is that, people tend to be much more open about the conversation in the first place, which is ultimately the thing you want is a conversation about it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, go for it, JJ.
Sorry, Meg. It's JJ speaking. I completely agree with Max. Having worked in companies, it does really help when the company are aware of that and when the topic matter is that. And so you really feel like you've got a space that is comfortable because the topic matter is that, which in a very strange way acts as a fantastic shield because it has to be a safe environment. It has to feel good in order for the work to be good. And in the experiences that I've had, both at the National Theatre and in other productions as well, it's been incredible to know that the people that you're in the room with, you don't have to start from sort of like ground zero of education, and that they already have a really good knowledge of that, and that you know that because you're working on something that is about neurodivergency, you can go and speak to people, and you've got that safety net of this is a safe zone because of those reasons.
I think totally that's what it comes down to. This is Meg speaking again. I think the rehearsal rooms I felt most safe in are definitely those where I know that there are people who have been educated on that subject matter of neurodivergency. I'm very lucky that my drama school course that I'm currently on, we have a lot of neurodivergent people in the room, and that has been a topic of conversation. So it's the first place that I felt safe and comfortable and accepted, bringing my fidget toy every single day. And that is something that I think is just really important, that it's not presumed that, oh, if I'm fiddling with this, I'm not paying attention, because I totally am. Anything else to add to this?
It's Max speaking again. That's the other thing that comes alongside the openness of people having kind of a base knowledge of what anyone's specific neurodivergence is that they're then more open to learning about the new ones that they may have missed. Again, like if you incorrectly use someone's pronouns, that it's not like anyone wants to jump on someone and go, no, straight away. It's like, so long as you're receptive to learn, that's the chill thing. That's the thing that's important to anyone in that room that needs someone to learn. And having that base level of knowledge already is kind of the catalyst for that openness and for more learning about.
Totally. What an amazing way to end this little point. My next question is, what things do you personally have to take into consideration when entering a new show or a new rehearsal room or a new company that a neurotypical person might not think about, trying to kind of like crack open what are some of those like small barriers that people might not think about?
It's JJ speaking. For me, it's the burnouts of rehearsals and how intense that can be. The fact that you're working really, really long hours and going into texts that are incredibly long days, and working out a way to prevent that burnout from happening. As rehearsal structures tend to go, the rehearsals tend to start shorter, and then the closer you get to the performance, everything obviously expands and gets longer, which is kind of counterproductive when you're that close to burning out and you're really, really tired, and then that you've got to perform for the first time in front of actual audiences. So for me, that's a massive barrier in terms of working out how to do that with a company, how to get enough rest between working to allow for processing, to allow for a great first performance of something. That's something that I've always come up against when creating any kind of work that I've done, is how to avoid the burnouts of that. Once we're in a run, it tends to be a little bit easier because you've got all day. But when you're in a rehearsal, you haven't got that time. You've only got all night, and it's very early mornings into very late nights. So that's something that I've often struggled with.
This is Max speaking. Kind of jumping on the back of what JJ said, the other thing that changes when you run into productions is your structure and your schedule tends to stick. And that's something to really bear in mind when working, again, specifically with autistic actors, is that routine and structure, if they've been laid out at the beginning and they're not adhered to, that might be a little bit of a problem for some autistic people. When schedules are changed last minute, letting the autistic person know as far in advance that schedule is changing will really help to have them cope with that change. And it's impossible, ultimately, to stick 100% to a schedule. Everyone in theatre knows that. It's a nightmare. But the more time you give someone to adapt to that change, the better.
Just wanted to jump on the back of what Max said about sort of structure and routine. I definitely personally feel exactly the same way. Like, I like to know what my day is going to look like and where I'm going to have the chance to be on my own and recharge and process, as JJ mentioned. One thing that I always like to take into consideration when I'm visiting a new venue or a new group of people is where I'm going and like what the building looks like, and is there going to be parking somewhere for me to park somewhere safely without like any pressure, like I don't have to parallel park on a busy main road, which I can do, but it's much nicer to know that there's going to be a disabled space waiting for me at the other end without sort of pressure to park quickly and run inside. Also, is there somewhere for me to escape to? Is there a quiet space that has been assigned exactly for this purpose? Not just we've got a disabled toilet. It's like, yes, that's great, but like you also need a separate quiet space, because I don't want to be taking up a disabled toilet for someone who may want to use it. Also, like, who are the people that I'm going to be working with? I think a lot of my anxiety around new situations is around people, and like, what are they going to say, and how are they going to feel about me, and all that sort of stuff that, you know, we have ingrained from us, you know, from being autistic or neurodivergent, is will they like me? You know, what is the structure? What is the hierarchy, if there is one? What, you know, who am I responding to? Like, you basically can't give me enough information about what's going to happen. And I totally appreciate that sometimes things happen last minute and things change last minute, like Max said. But I think the more that we talk about it, the more it will become ingrained in our practices as theatre makers and, you know, leaders and organisers.
Meg speaking. So kind of to jump on that, potentially something that someone could create before starting rehearsals is just a list of who everyone is, their pronouns, and what jobs they're kind of fulfilling within a production, and just getting that kind of list ahead of schedule might be helpful, ahead of like meeting people. And I also agree, I think, I can't remember what they're specifically called, the name has gone from my head, but having something sent ahead to be like, this is what the space will look like, this is what the building will look like.
The visual story,
yes,
social story. Yeah.
Yeah. Look up visual stories, they're great. Essentially, Battersea Art Centre has a really great example on their website of just, this is what this space looks like, this is what you can expect here, here, and here. Or just like telling you how to get to the venue and what it will look like, just to help feel relaxed, really.
Sorry, just to jump very quickly on the back of that, I've noticed that auditions are getting very, very, very good at this. They're really, at the moment, I've had a lot of auditions through whereby they are sending all of that stuff unprompted, and there seems to have been a real shift in doing that for audition candidates, but it doesn't seem to be quite as strong for actual theatre rehearsals and experiences. But there is I've noticed it a lot, the massive improvement in photographs, and this is who's going to be in the room, this is their pronouns, this is what it's going to look like, this is what we expect of you, this is how you get here, there's an alternative way to get here. I've noticed a massive improvement from casting directors in that regard. It just doesn't quite seem to work quite as well once you get into the rehearsal room at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I totally agree, and like, I think it is a case of as well I think people are requesting access documents as well beforehand, which is, just for people who might not be aware, access documents are kind of similar to what a celebrity might be like, being like, oh, I don't want these things. It's basically for anyone can use them, but just saying, these are the things that maybe I would like an audition panel to be aware of. Maybe I'm autistic, so therefore I have this requirement or this requirement, like I need a quiet space beforehand. And I think auditions are getting better at asking for that, but maybe they're less taken into consideration when it reaches the longer rehearsal period.
I just wanted to jump off the back. Oh, it's Erin, by the way, my apologies. I just wanted to jump off. Excuse me, I just muted myself. On the back of what JJ said about how auditions are great and like auditions are doing really well and wonderful. And as soon as we kind of get into the contract confirmed, #booked and blessed situation, everything just kind of drops off. It's kind of like, you know, when you're dating and you wear your nice clothes and you like change your pants and like have a shower every time you see them. And then as soon as you've kind of sealed the deal, like all that stuff kind of stops. Like that's how it feels. And it's like, no, we have to keep working on the relationship. Like we have to keep doing these things and like putting spark into our marriage, if I'm going to continue using the metaphor. I can't believe I've just gone down that route, but here we are. I was going to say something and I got all excited and giggly and I've completely forgotten what it was I was going to say. I'm sure it'll come back to me as soon as I start thinking of something else.
This is Max speaking. I'll fill in some time whilst you re-gauge where you're at, Erin. Another thing that I think is kind of obvious that we neurodivergent people kind of have to consider before entering a room is when we're going to tell people that we're autistic, have ADHD, dyslexia, all those kind of things, you know. personally, I've always just, ever since my diagnosis when I think I was 14 or so, and there are many people that are undiagnosed, but myself personally, I've always told people pretty much immediately. And that's always worked well for me, but I'm aware it doesn't work well for others. So there are a lot of people that walk into a room not quite knowing when they're going to drop it, and what reaction that will have. And that kind of wait is difficult. So again, that's something else to consider when working with anyone, is there might be someone in that room who is neurodivergent and doesn't quite know how to say it. So if you're neurodivergent in that room and you feel like you can say it, perhaps saying it yourself first would be a nice kind of introduction for that person to say it themselves. And Erin, it looks like
I remembered what I was going to say. Yeah. No, it ties in quite nicely with what you said, Max. Actually, I was going to talk about a negotiated space as opposed to a safe space. I think there's a real culture at the moment of being like, this is a safe space, this is a safe space, because they know that this is a buzzword, or this is a thing that people are saying a lot at the moment. I'm just going to wait for that to stop, otherwise my brain will turn off. Someone's revving a motorbike outside in my road, very kindly and very coincidentally. Yeah, sort of the idea of a negotiated space over a safe space, like when I was saying before about like we have to continue working on this situation or whatever, just saying this is a safe space isn't enough. Like we have to continue negotiating and continue talking and continue checking in. And like I can speak from experience as an AFAB person, I did not get diagnosed with any kind of neurodivergence. I'm still not diagnosed with autism, quite frankly, because I don't want to put myself through the experience of the NHS autism diagnosis process. And I challenge anyone who would say, well, you're not really autistic, is say, how long have you known me for? Because I've known me for 32 years and I know exactly how my brain works and I know exactly how I communicate and I know exactly how I struggle. So anyway, that's a tangent that we'll leave for another day. But what I think we need to be doing is continually having these discussions and having these sort of like uncomfortable discussions sometimes, because people's diagnoses change. Someone's got to get a diagnosis at some point if they are going to get one, and that might be in the middle of your rehearsal process, that might be in the middle of a run, and they might not want to tell. Like when I got diagnosed with my disability, I was diagnosed for 6 months before I told anyone, and I was working on a musical at the time, and I was just like, how am I going to tell my boss that I have an energy limiting illness when I'm supposed to be on it 8 days a week, you know, or 8 times a week rather. 8 days a week, it's a little bit Beatles, isn't it? So yeah, I think this idea of like a continually negotiated space as opposed to a safe space is something that needs to start coming into our vernacular. Not that there's anything wrong with safe spaces. I'm very glad that they've existed. They kind of they walked so negotiated spaces could run. Did I get that right? Thank you. Yay, thank you, Meg. Cheers.
Oh, I was just going to say, this brings me brilliantly onto our next, like you've started covering it already, but onto the next question of like, do you think there are opportunities to be open about neurodivergence in your workspace or in the roles you're put up for? Just to reiterate that as like a question now.
This is JJ speaking. I think it really depends. I think that sometimes it's really welcoming, and then other times I get the vibe that maybe this isn't the right time to talk about this, or this isn't the right company. And ultimately, I always kind of think they're not the people you want to be working with or for if you don't feel like that's a conversation that would be willing and ready to be had. I've got it on my spotlight. So most of the things that I'm submitted for as an actor, the casting directors already know about it. And I do think there's an interesting conversation in that the 90% of the things that I am seen for are autistic neurodivergent roles. I rarely am seen for anything else. I'm sought out for that specific thing. And maybe that's because I've had a career whereby that has been what I have always done. But you do often get the vibe when you walk into an audition room or you see the spec that it might not be the most safe place or the most negotiable place. And the most strange one is when everybody's saying that it is, but you then start to slowly realize that it isn't. So I think it's a 50-50. I think that there are brilliant places. There are brilliant theatre companies. There are brilliant productions at the moment and in the past that have happened where that is the case, and it is wonderful. But I do think there's also quite a long way to go in other areas. And it really is a little bit of a minefield. You never quite know which one you're going to get.
Yeah, I feel like that's very much kind of like that sad reality of not really knowing whether it's going to be a safe space or not. I know I'm very much someone who is not diagnosed officially, but is on the waiting list, which is lovely and long, and I can't wait to be off it. But yeah, but it is that kind of thing of not always knowing if, and also just as someone who's autistic, not knowing if this is the time or space to say it as well. Like that's just a big thing for me, is not knowing whether, oh, is this the right time, or am I just pushing this into a situation when it is not entirely appropriate?
I feel like being autistic or neurodivergent as a whole is such an integral part of my personality, and such influences the way that I conduct myself so enormously, that I don't ever feel like it's, I mean, obviously I'm not just going to be like, I'm autistic at a really inappropriate time, but also I never feel the shame of, well, maybe not shame's the right word, maybe the inappropriateness of doing that, because they're going to find out one way or another. There's no avoiding it. And if I'm in a situation where I don't feel safe to disclose it, do I really want to be working for this company? Is this someone I want to be devoting my time and energy to? But I can also see, I also acknowledge that I'm in a really privileged position with that, because not everyone is comfortable disclosing their diagnosis, you know, whether they're self-diagnosed or formally diagnosed or whatever. I've always just been the person that's like, I'm autistic. Like I was at the airport the other day, and it was very, very fancy in Corona times, I know, but I was at the airport the other day and some guy jumped in front of me at the water fountain, and I was like, yeah, and then I was kind of like, okay, fine, whatever, and then he turned around and he was like, I'm just kidding, and I was just like not in the mood at all, because I was in an airport during a pandemic, so I just literally turned to him and I was like, I'm autistic. Like, just did my sort of like dead kind of robot face, just fully unmasked, and was just like, no, your joke was not funny. And it was just so glorious. I absolutely loved it. And I told all my friends, I was like, hashtag autistic joy. It was really fun. That's the end of that thought. Just wanted to share.
This is Max speaking. The plus side of being autistic and accidentally dropping it at a very inappropriate time is that you're kind of proving the rule as you do it. You're like, I don't know when's an appropriate time, so I'm just going to do it now. And that is, you know, that's very much, some people describe autism as a form of context blindness, pardon me. And that's a, you know, an apt way of demonstrating that. Another thing that I do is I tend to put it in the description of, like, when everyone introduces themselves, sometimes you get, say who you are, and a fun fact. It's always my fun fact, that or the Rubik's Cube thing. But to be honest, that's kind of proof of autism as well. And pronouns, again, it's like, if you can bundle everything in an introduction, you feel comfortable doing that, that's you doing your bit. But in terms of other workplaces doing it, whoever's leading the room, I think it should be their responsibility to say, just so you know, if anyone's neurodivergent, they'll probably know if you've disclosed it to them. If anyone's neurodivergent, feel free to pop it in if you're comfortable. Yeah, it's just being open.
I've run a course. I actually founded a consultation company with my friend when we did a lot of training around working with disabled and chronically ill and neurodivergent people, and our start was in improv, because I am an improviser, and there is so much in improv that in order to be successful, let's say in inverted commas, that relies on you effectively being neurotypical, being able to make good eye contact, being able to hang out in the pub for hours afterwards, being able to just know, you know, all that kind of stuff, and be able to do that illusion. And we talk a lot about leaders and like what leaders can do in that space to make neurodivergent participants' lives easier. And you know, this is obviously a different discussion, so I won't go too much into it, but one of the things that we do say is sort of that idea of modeling. So like you know, when you get that dreaded circle at the beginning and you're like, I'm Erin and my fun fact is that I have a dog and la-di-la, you know, but then sort of modeling and saying, I don't have any access needs. If you are comfortable sharing them, then feel free to. If there's anything we can do to make you more comfortable, in the same breath, you don't have to, kind of thing. I think modeling is just, I think, is the best practice in this day and age.
Amazing. That's a really lovely note to end on, unless anyone else has anything to add before we move on to kind of our little next section. Great. I'm going to talk a bit about relaxed performances for a bit. So relaxed performances, for people who know, are kind of, they're difficult to define because there is not one agreed upon kind of setting for them. But the idea is it is a more open space where theatre etiquette is kind of thrown a little bit more out the window and people are allowed to move around comfortably. There might be some adjustments to the production to make it more open and welcoming to neurodivergent people even. And I just wanted to ask, what do you think is missing at the moment as a group from the majority of relaxed performances that you would benefit from?
This is JJ speaking. I think that what is missing at the moment is the majority of relaxed performances. There are not enough of them. And especially, I do not understand, and I'm a huge advocate for, I cannot understand how massive West End houses do runs of shows that have existed for 25 to 30 years in London and have never done one. I just do not understand how that's the case. So that would kind of be my point. I know it doesn't exactly answer the question, but I think relaxed performances in and of themselves are absent. They are coming up more and more. There are shows that are doing them more and more. Interestingly, it does tend to be lower budget shows that do them more and more, which is a really strange, you'd think it would be the other way around, that would have the money to prop them up, but that's not the case. I think that there needs to be more of them. In order for that learning to kind of grow and for the domino effect of the big guys to start to fall, to get the NIMAXs, to get the Macintosh theatres, the Andrew Lloyd Webber theatres to all sort of start to do this more. I think that it needs to start up. There needs to be a little bit more of a push for them. And I think that producers are the ones really that need to be kind of talked to about that, massively so.
Yeah, I agree with JJ completely. Like, there aren't enough. When I saw this question on the document that was sent to us, I was like, my overarching feeling is that there aren't enough. And I find that with all houses, venues, whatever, producers, if you have the infrastructure for one relaxed performance, you have the infrastructure for all of them to be relaxed. Because I mean, unless there's some big producer secret that I'm not privy to, and to be honest, I haven't produced, full disclaimer, I haven't produced a show since I discovered I was neurodivergent because of panettone. But if there's some big producer secret that I don't know about, it doesn't cost you any more to have more relaxed performances. Once you've bought the ear defenders, or you've booked the quiet space, or you've done the training for your front of house, you've made sure that those visual guides are around, they're printed, they're up, those don't cost money every time you use them. They kind of exist in perpetuity, if that makes sense. And I appreciate that, there's experiences that you're like, well, there's this experience of the show that's integral, and we don't want it to be a relaxed, although also the word relaxed is kind of weird, and I could probably go into that for a long time as well. And I also am very aware that there are different types of needs. Obviously there's overstimulation, there's understimulation, there's different types of input that people struggle with. Like, I personally am a real sufferer with like auditory processing and auditory overload, whereas some people are more sort of visual. I think it doesn't cost any money to have more, unless there's something that someone's gatekeeping from me, in which case also shame on you, because we need to break down gatekeeping. But again, that's a whole other panel. And it drives me absolutely bonkers when you also get those like things of like, oh, if there was like more people taking, like if there was more people that wanted to do it, then we would do more. And I'm like, I'm going to refer you to this article about the social model of disability. Please read it, and then we'll have this discussion again. Because demand and booking and sort of numbers that come into your box office doesn't necessarily mean demand. It doesn't necessarily mean that people are looking at your show and going, oh, I don't want to go because I don't like it. It might be that they just can't go on that day, or they have something else to do, because funnily enough, neurodivergent people have jobs and lives and commitments that they need to attend to. So I feel like the more opportunities, I mean, I'm more than happy to link to the social model disability in the YouTube chat. I'm going to do that right now because I care about it very, very much. The more opportunities that come, the more disabled people and neurodivergent people will come out. The more we see them, the more it happens. But we, as the people in power, or say the producers, people in power, gatekeepers, whatever, have to be the people to break that cycle. It can't rely on the little guy, because we simply don't have the resources to say, well, I'm going to keep booking and booking and booking and booking to make myself visible as an audience member, because we simply don't have the money, whereas you do. This makes me so mad. I'm going to go and find a lovely article about the social model disability, and I'm going to put it in the chat right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. This is Meg speaking. I have 10 things that I need to respond to in that, but then half of them have disappeared. I think, yeah, for me, something that I find, again, the word relaxed for me is always a bit of a weird word. I think what we need to do is change the idea of there being one idea of what a relaxed performance looks like. And maybe if we could have more relaxed performances, or more types of different performances, maybe some that are, because I think for me, I have very different needs to someone else who might be autistic or dyslexic or any of those, or any kind of neurodivergence. And I feel like what we need is more different types of relaxed performances. One that has, because there are going to be some people who want to be right next to the bass, overstimulating, feeling that, whereas there's going to be some people who want everything turned down low music-wise, or are like, oh, I really want all the visuals, but I don't want that loud sound. And I think what we just need is more different types of ones. Erin.
Hello, it's Erin speaking. Very neurodivergently, I'm going to bounce around back to a previous point that we were discussing, but it was inspired, the thought was inspired by a comment that was in the YouTube chat that I just wanted to pick up on. Ellis has said, I liked Erin's "you can't provide me with enough information" statement, which is very sweet of you, thank you. I realised that in the previous discussion we were talking about barriers to entering a new company. One thing that I forgot to mention, I think is really, really important, is making sure that the information that you're providing to people is accessible and digestible. Because while you can't provide me with enough information, if you bombard me with lots and lots of paperwork and documents and sort of attachments and zip folders and things to read, I'm just going to shut off. I think what's really, really important is to make sure that if you are presenting documents to people, that you have an easy read format, a video format, an audio format. That was it. I'm really glad that I mentioned it, because I was like, oh no, I've forgotten to say it. But thank you, Ellis, for your lovely comment. That meant a lot to me.
Yes. And there also are some great guides online for that sort of thing, of how to present information best. Max, to you.
Yeah, this is Max speaking. There was one idea that JJ and I worked on a project together recently, and there was one idea that JJ had, which was fascinating and fantastic. And it was the idea of having a screen up during a relaxed performance with all the information of the components of the show that were missing. So when you do a show and you relax, there are certain things that have to go, whether that's language based, whether that's flames or fire or pyrotechnics, lights and set pieces, all that kind of thing, level of emotion in scene, that information being provided to the attendees. Because in some ways you lose aspects of in many ways you lose aspects of a show when you make it a relaxed performance. And I just thought that idea was fantastic.
Yeah.
The other thing was kind of a combination of what JJ and Erin were saying, which is that the thing that it costs to do relaxed performances is revenue and ticket sales. That's the only thing it really costs once you've got everything, because access tickets cost less, because you have to provide them with the cheapest seat in the house, because it's kind of assuming that's what anyone would be able to afford, which is a roundabout box office way of pricing tickets. But anyway, that's why the big guys need to do it, is because they're the ones that can initially afford it. And anyway, this could go into a whole anti-capitalist rant, which it won't.
I'm here for that.
I'm going to stop now, Erin.
I'm here for it, Max.
JJ's got.
Yeah, far away, mate.
This is JJ speaking. I was going to say that one of the major things that I think come up isn't always the money. It's the complete lack of vision and understanding as to what a relaxed performance is. I've had conversations whereby producers and people have said, but we can't. You've seen the show, how can we can't do that, we can't do this show relaxed. How is that even possible? Look at the show, look, we use projection mapping, we've got revolves galore, we've got things flying in all over the place, like how on earth can we do that? To which I've always responded, but you do realize that an audience who are coming to a relaxed performance, they know that they're not going to see that. And if you can't do it with just the acting on the stage and dialing all those elements back, then there's a problem with your storytelling. If you're using that as a crutch so much that that's what you're leaning onto, then you aren't developing, you aren't thinking as the creative very clearly. And I think that it isn't always the idea of money. Oftentimes it is, but sometimes it's a complete lack of vision, that they just don't understand that you can do this. It doesn't matter what the show entails. You can do wicked relaxed if you so wanted to. It doesn't matter, because the people coming understand what a relaxed performance is 9 times out of 10 better than the producers of the show do.
I think, Erin speaking here, it's great that you mentioned wicked, JJ, because I know from sort of my own work in sort of neurodivergent theatre making, or entrepreneurship if you like, is that I know that a huge amount of I know that Wicked has a really big neurodivergent fan base, because it's about being different. It's about being perceived differently. It's about being misunderstood and not communicating or looking the way that people might expect you to. And I just think it's such a fundamental lack of dramaturgical and sort of marketing skill, I think, in a way, to be like, well, these people, we're not going to market to these people, or we're not going to provide relaxed performances for these people. It's like, but that just shows that you aren't listening to your audience, or you aren't listening to your fan base, the people who've paid your bills and put clothes on your children's back for the last 10-15 years. It infuriates me to see something doing so well when there's obviously such a lack in basic skill. It's very frustrating.
Meg speaking. It's very much if you can put on a concert version of a show, then you can put on a relaxed performance version of the show. It's that simple. It's just that you're going to take away a few elements. And I don't think, like you said, I don't think producers or creatives are having that creative mind of thinking. I don't think that it's, and this came up in a past discussion when we were talking about the queer panel, of like producers or casting people not having enough creativity to think about different solutions or different ways of casting people. Like, what is to say that this character who has always been presumed neurotypical could not be played by someone who is neurodivergent? What new thing would that bring to that character? And it's things like that. It's people who say that they can't do relaxed performances. It's just a lack of creative thinking. Right. I'm just keeping an eye on the time, so we have time for a little break, which I might call now slightly 3 minutes earlier, just so we're just having a short little break, just to stim, to relax, and we'll be back in a few minutes. See you then, folks. Hello, I'm just going to invite everyone back into the chat, ready to continue. So our next section is going to be kind of focusing on, this is Meg speaking, by the way, this is going to be focused on writing and how we write shows with featuring neurodivergence. So to start off, I want to ask, how can shows be built with neurodivergent considerations from the very beginning, from the starting of the writing process, from the idea phase?
Hi, this is JJ speaking. When I started writing my own play, I wanted to write it from a perspective of honesty, and I really tried to just write it as the experiences from myself and others who had contributed to that. And one of the main things that I really wanted to work on was not shying away from humor, not shying away from those laughing points and allowing them to be there, and to try and explain things. I feel that people often listen more when it's funny, or it evokes that kind of positive reaction in people. So one of the things that I really tried very hard with my own work to do, and I'm not entirely sure whether or not it was a success across the board, was to make sure that it was the neurodivergent people in the casting company were able to laugh at themselves, invite other people to laugh with them as opposed to at them, and use that as a point of education. And realizing that some of the stuff, it is funny. Some stuff within neurodivergent life is funny, and there's not any shame in that. There's nothing villainous about that. And I'm not saying laugh at neurodivergent people, but as a neurodivergent autistic man myself, allow that space to tell your story comically if you want to. And as a writing device, I tried to balance both comedy and the reality, the sadness of it at the same time, for what I hope was good effect.
Hello, it's Erin speaking. That's a really good point. I love that point, JJ, about sort of inviting people to laugh with us and not at us. There's so many parts of neurodivergent life that is really funny, like the airport story before. Surprisingly enough, we do have a sense of humor. But ultimately, I would say, first of all, consider who the show is for, like why you're writing it. I've stopped talking directly to JJ now, my apologies. So in general, consider who you're writing the show for. Like, why do you want to tell this story? Why now? Who is going to pay your mortgage for the next year if you're selling all those tickets? And how do you best service them? And I think the best way to do that, you'll only really know through things like training and sort of awareness work and doing your research, and if you've got the money, working with an inclusive dramaturg who can help you with these sorts of things. Listen to neurodivergent creators, listen to neurodivergent employees, but also don't rely on them to educate you. There are so many things out there. There's so many workshops, there's so many training resources, there's so many guides, but I think the thing that is really difficult at the moment post-pandemic is people are really struggling to commit to anything, I think, and rightly so. Like, it's been a very stressful and unsure time for all of us, not just neurodivergent and disabled people, but you have to commit to doing it, which seems a bit sort of facetious just to throw it out there, but I honestly think it's the crux of everything, is that you have to commit to this because this is the way that the world is going, and rightfully so.
Max speaking. When you're beginning writing, I suppose there are two options. Either you're writing specifically about neurodivergent people, or you're not. If you're not, you'd have to try really hard to not accidentally write in someone that might be neurodivergent, because we're everywhere. Everyone that you're basing your characters off of probably will have traits that are neurodivergent, and it's really difficult to miss us. So it's difficult to kind of screw up at that first stage. The next stage you can screw up is in casting, but I'm sure we'll get to that within this conversation. If you are writing specifically about neurodivergent people and you're not, which I think is perfectly chill, go ahead and do that. Just ask some neurodivergent people to read it at first draft and just say, does this sound like your voice? Do you see yourself in this? And then give it to as many neurodivergent people as you can and know, just to check up and see if they feel like they're being represented in some way. Just for accuracy more than anything, because it would be better if it's more accurate. Yeah, those are my only 2 cents. Oh, Erin's got some more.
Yeah, I have more sense. I agree with you. I think it's nice to allow writers to use their imagination, actors to use their imagination in terms of who they're portraying or who they're describing or building a world of. I mean, I know we could, again, this is probably a question further down the line about, you know, should neurodivergent actors, should neurotypical actors play neurodivergent parts, and so on. It's lovely if you want to, but I would really consider why you want to, like, why do you feel the need to do that? And is it a self-serving reason? Is it, I'm doing this because I want to be a nice, inclusive person and that will make me feel good? Or is it that you it's genuinely integral to the story, or you genuinely have the research, the chops, the team, the trustees, whatever, to back it up? Because we don't need saviorism. That's for one thing. It's like when people go to Africa to build houses, and it's just like, don't you think it would be better to let local people have the job? They're perfectly capable of doing the job of building the house, whatever. It feels almost like by writing a story that doesn't belong to you, kind of to us, implies that you don't think we're capable of telling the story ourselves. And it's nice is a terrible word and I keep using it. It's much better to leave the space and uplift people who actually come from those backgrounds to do it themselves, because they are perfectly capable and they have lots of stories to tell. So I don't agree with Max, but I don't disagree with Max. I think, you know, it's a very it's a very grey situation. There are lots of things to take into consideration, but I think honestly, consider why you're doing it. If you're not neurodivergent yourself.
I found, this is Meg speaking, it's been really interesting for me as a neurodivergent person looking back at the work I've started creating, because there are certain works I have started on which have not necessarily been about a neurodivergent story, but have ended up with neurodivergent characters in, and how that differs to a show that I'm writing in the early stages of writing, which centers entirely on neurodivergence. And I think for me, some things that have kind of popped up in my mind of thinking of, like, is if your main character who is telling the story is neurodivergent, they are not going to tell it in a linear way. At least from my experience of neurodivergence, I tell stories in a way that jumps back and forth and all over the place. And I think that is a really interesting structural choice that is not as always explored in these kinds of stories, if it is told from the perspective of a neurodivergent protagonist. And I also think there are certain ways, especially in musicals, that we can start writing from the beginning. Things like, I've been writing this show about neurodivergence called I Found Your Cool Rock, which is about neurodivergent love, and thinking about how we build up orchestration in a way, and musicals and songs, thinking about how we can still create interesting songs without there necessarily being like a sudden leap in sound levels, or how do we portray, thinking sound-based wise, how do we portray overstimulation without that being necessarily overstimulating? And I find that as a really interesting question I don't necessarily have the answer to, but I want to provoke that thought in more people. Yes, JJ.
One other thing that I wanted to say was that if you are not neurodivergent yourself and you are going to write about a neurodivergent character, the least that can be done is you to say so. I have seen a lot of work whereby you know exactly what's inspired this character and who they really are, but it's not said so. And the reason it's not said so is so that when it gets performed and stuff, is that it doesn't have to include that. You know, we don't have to bother with the accessy stuff because it's not really that. It's just we've used that as a massive inspiration and a massive foundation for who we've created, but they're not really, you know. And I think that that's something that I've found incredibly common in massive commercial projects that I've seen, that I'm like, I know exactly who this character is, but you're not saying so. And that's an issue. That's something that I do take massive umbrage with, that I really think is not right. That if you are going to do it, if you are going to be a non-neurodivergent writer and you're going to create something about neurodivergency, at least say so, would be a point that I was gonna make about that.
That kind of brings us nicely to our next question, actually, which is, what advice would you give to a neurotypical person who is interested in writing a neurodivergent storyline or neurodivergent characters? And we've covered that briefly here, but I just want to see if anyone else had anything else they want to add.
Hi, it's Erin speaking. I wanted to add on, at the very least, do your research. Ask a neurodivergent person and pay them. Pay them. Clapping emoji. Pay them for their time, their labor, their emotional and physical energy. It's the very least you can do. Better yet, hire them on your team. Hire a neurodivergent producer. Hire a neurodivergent director. Hire an inclusive and or neurodivergent dramaturg. Pay them.
Hi, this is JJ. Again, I think that massively it comes down to research, it comes down to intention. If that is something that you're going to go ahead and do, make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, make sure that you're doing it correctly and involving enough of that narrative. And you can, I do believe, perhaps slightly controversially yet brave, that neurotypical people can, if given all of the right creative environments, can write really good neurodivergent characters, because that's down to writing. But writing is work. You've got to do the work, you've got to do the research, you've got to know exactly what this is. And by doing research, one of the things about autism stuff that I would say is probably avoid the Google. Talk to people, go out and actually do physical work to try and to learn about the people that you're writing about, and make sure that the foundation that you have is one that you have on a first-hand basis, not that you've just acquired through the internet or through only reading. I don't think that that's quite enough. If you are going to do it, you've got to do a significant amount of work to make sure that you're getting it right.
You all have covered it.
Yes, thank you for that. That was wonderful. I want to ask, since it came up in a previous discussion, how we feel about neurodivergent casting and whether neurotypical people can and should be asked to audition and perform roles about neurodivergence and neurodivergent characters.
Hi, this is JJ. I personally think, and again, it's probably quite a controversial opinion as an actor, that that's okay if neurodivergent people were getting roles and seen at equitable levels with everybody else, but they're not. So if you're going to do it, where are all the famous neurodivergent actors and stage actors? Speaking specifically about stage, where are those people? So I think that it's massively important to see neurodivergent people for these parts first, primarily making sure that obviously you're getting the accuracy there. If neurodivergent people were being employed, high support needs, low support needs all over the shop, I would have less of an issue with it. It's the fact that they are not. And those, like I said, for myself, the only thing that I'm seeing for are neurodivergent parts. So it's quite annoying to see that role go to somebody who is not that when they can have all the other parts as well. But I can only be seen for the parts that are accurate to myself. So I would have much less issue with it than I currently do if I thought that we were seen for a wide range of things and equitably employed across a wide range of entertainment platforms. But I don't think that's the case.
I agree with JJ. This is Erin speaking. I agree with JJ wholeheartedly. For me, the answer at the moment is a flat no, because there are so many people waiting to be seen and so many people waiting to be represented that, quite frankly, it's lazy casting to not do that work. Because of the reason that JJ stated, like, we're not being seen, we're not getting those opportunities. And then I've had these discussions online before and in social media where people say, well, we're gonna have to get a butcher to play a butcher these days. And I'm like, yes, but a butcher hasn't been discriminated against because of something that they can't control. Like, I don't want to hear that argument. It is such a boring old Daily Mail argument that I just have absolutely no patience for in this day and age. We need to be putting people on stage, on screen, so that the audience can see themselves represented, and we all know what representation does. Just that picture of the little girl looking up at the picture of Michelle Obama in the museum, that gets me every single time. I don't know if you've seen it, but there's a picture of a young black girl, a young black girl who, I was going to say young black girl of color, I was like, you don't need to do them both, Erin, looking up at this picture of Michelle Obama in this like beautiful dress, and it makes me cry every single time. Representation really, really, truly matters, and I know I don't need to tell anyone on this panel that is the case, but I will ring that bell until the day I die.
Max speaking. I'm possibly slightly less, again, this is all to do with like my experience as an actor in the industry. I'm probably slightly less on the side of that shouldn't happen at all now, but I totally understand the reasoning. I think actors can and probably will do anything and have done for ages, and you know, the thing about the butcher thing is it's just strictly irrelevant. Like, that's not going to happen. That's not the case. Like, it's never going there. That's not what's going to happen, because acting is and will continue to all be about creative limitations, right? How do limitations create something that you can kind of get past in a creative way? So yeah, I think it's oftentimes neurotypical actors can do a great job at playing neurodiverse parts, but it's not relevant. The relevancy is, as both Erin and JJ were saying, the fact that people aren't necessarily seen for those parts when they should be. And
just
Erin's
because, to bounce exactly what you just said, Max, just because they can doesn't mean they should. It's not the same thing.
I also, Meg speaking, I also think it's the case of like, it's the fact that I think this would be a completely different issue as well if neurodivergent people were being seen for neurotypical parts or asked to bring their neurodivergence to different roles that are maybe haven't been seen in that light before. And I wish that this happened more, because there are so many characters that I think are neurodivergent coded within certain big shows that have never been portrayed as canonly neurodivergent. And I just think we need more of it. We need more of that happening, as well as more neurodivergent people being cast in neurodivergent roles.
I do a lot of, Erin speaking, my apologies. I do a lot of sort of social media stuff around, hey, I'm a neurodivergent theatre maker and I'm disabled, and let's kind of, you know, stick it to the man. And one of the hot topics of discussion at the moment in my Twitter was about non-disabled actors playing Nessa Rose in Wicked. And I was like, don't even get me started. I have a long, let's just say I have a long history and a big old soft sore spot for that. And I know it's not particularly relevant to a neurodivergent panel, but it is just like, but why not a wheelchair using actress or actor, or performer, however we want to, how they ever want to identify.
Max
end of thought. My apologies.
And people be like, but just because she stands up at the end. But they make a whole person fly in the show, so surely they can make. Anyway, Meg makes a great point in terms of neurodivergent people not necessarily playing neurotypical parts. Again, I can only speak from my own experience. I've played a lot of neurotypical parts. In fact, most of my parts have been neurotypical in their kind of basis. But also, on the same note, I have never in my life played a neurotypical part. Those characters that I end up playing have never actually been neurotypical. And again, that's because the writing has been open enough wherein I can put all of those things that I am, and that part becomes, for me, an autistic part. Again, coming off of something that JJ said, a lot of that is coded into parts that already exist and just not spoken about. Yeah, speaking about it, I think you will, if you say this part is autistic, if you say Evan Hansen is autistic, then Evan Hansen will likely, you'd hope, be given to more autistic actors. And I think the simplicity of just saying this part is autistic will increase the amount of autistic actors that exist and are seen for things. The other thing that I want to add in is that I think I have the privilege of playing a lot of neurotypical parts because I'm a cis male. And therefore, I kind of, those parts are almost the norm. Like, that is the norm for, like, autism tends to be seen as a male disorder, tends to, and therefore it exists in those parts more often. And so it's kind of, everything's so intersectional. Like, that's part of my privilege, but also part of, you know what I'm saying.
That actually brings me really nicely onto a question about like representation of neurodivergence and gender, because there is still a massive gap in representation between AMAB, which means assigned male at birth, and AFAB representation, assigned female at birth, especially in neurodivergence, but particularly in like ADHD and autism. And I was curious to ask people on this panel, how can we make sure that women, non-binary people, trans men aren't left behind in neurodivergent representation?
Erin speaking. Hi. I've written in my notes, yell and being annoying as possible. And don't be concerned about being annoying. Well-behaved women, brackets, or people seldom make history. I believe that it's the most important thing is just to keep talking, keep saying, keep annoying, keep badgering, keep pestering. There's no other way. And I have no fear about being perceived as too much or annoying, because we need to fight for what we deserve. I could also talk for so long about the NHS and for so long about its underfunding and its sort of treatment of AFAB people in general, but particularly disabled and neurodivergent people. It is an absolute farce, and we all know why. It's an absolute, we all know why the NHS is in a mess. I'm not going to mention the T word in this sacred negotiated space, but I think it starts with things like that. Thank you, nice one, Max. It starts from the bottom. It starts from making sure that people get the support they need, making sure that they get the funding, the benefits, the access support that they need. And in the theatre context, it revolves around championing those people, uplifting them, making sure their voices are heard, and funding people to make their work. Give them money, because how else is it going to happen?
For me, obviously, I'm a cisgendered white man, and that's something that obviously this particular point of conversation isn't something that I can directly speak on in any way, shape, or form. However, I would say for people like myself, it's identifying and understanding where you stand with that, knowing that I've just done a run of a show that I wrote myself about neurodivergency on an off West End stage, and I've got people saying, I've never seen anything like this before. Publishers saying to me, I've never seen anything like this before, let's publish it. And there's a reason that I'm a cis white man in that position, not somebody else, and I'm very, very aware of that. And it's encouraging, making sure that, for example, in our production, I really wanted, and I was really, really heavy and specific on, I really want to involve non-binary and trans actors in this process, so that we can have that influence of neurodivergency that hasn't yet broken through that barrier, hasn't yet come through as much as people like myself have done. And that was something that I was very, very conscious of during the creation of that show, was that ultimately I am the mold of an autistic man in the eyes of society. And I think that it's important to branch that out further. So I think that when it comes to people like myself, it's an understanding of the fact that you are still privileged, and you still have that higher ground, and you need to use that in whatever way you can to extend an arm out to people who are not quite there yet, and identify those reasons and talk about those reasons, and use that platform, small as it may be, to try and do that.
I also think it's just about signaling that fact, and the fact that it is that education of, if we say it more and say, I don't think this, when you look at the well-known roles within West End shows, which there really is only one that's neurodiverse, but we all know what it is, and it is of a cis person's experience, a cis man's experience. But I think it's also just about saying that fact and letting people know that, hey, there is this gap, and we need to think about closing it. We need to wrap up so we can get to some questions from our audience, but I just want to ask one final question of everyone, just nice and brief. What is one thing you wish people knew about being neurodivergent and working in your field that you might not have brought up already?
Hi, this is JJ. It isn't always difficult. It can be the easiest thing in the world. Good access makes it the easiest thing in the world. If you put that work in and you provide that foundation, everything from there is easy, really, really easy. I think that people still have a massive phobia about it, still think, this is going to be like trying to raise the Titanic. And it isn't, as long as you do the right work and you provide, that's it. It's a very, very easy thing to do good access.
It's Erin speaking here. I got a bit confused then, JJ, because you were like, it's the easiest thing in the world. I was like, being a creative freelancer is not the easiest thing in the world. And then I realized you were talking about venues. And I was like, oh, yeah, for sure. It is easy. Being a creative freelancer, because I've written, it is hard and horrible and difficult. And 10% of the time you're at, well, maybe even 1% of the time you're doing the thing that you actually want to do with your life. And the 99 other percent of the time you're doing admin or processing or recovering from burnout. And the people who are in that space, who have offered you their CV, who have come to see your show, have done so much work in order to get there, and they are superheroes. And I suppose I'm probably sounding a bit vain here because I'm just probably directly talking about myself. I am an absolute superhero, and so are my peers on this panel, and so are so many other people that I've connected with in the last few years since discovering that I was neurodivergent. It is hard work, but we have so much to give, and we have so much to tell you, and we have so much to share with you, and the determination and the hyperfixation, I suppose, to get it done and get those stories told. We have so much to give. Yeah, end of thought.
Max speaking here. If you're empathetic, like, it's chill. That's the chillest thing. If you just like want to understand people, and to be fair, if you're a writer, like, you probably do want to, and hopefully if you're a director too, you probably do want to understand people. Surely that's part of the beauty of art, is that people learn things, right? Through this process of empathy. If you're empathetic, it's the easiest thing in the world. That's all. Yeah. If you work on a project where someone isn't empathetic, it's the hardest thing in the world, and it's 10 times harder if you're neurodivergent, because there isn't that patience. So yeah, patience and empathy are things that thankfully are abundant in this industry, but sometimes are not.
I'm going to finish it off with just something like, I've been happy stimming for the last little bit, just with my legs. I've been really enjoying this, guys. And I'm going to finish it off with just saying, I haven't always been comfortable being out publicly as autistic, as neurodivergent. And if you two feel the same, like you're not comfortable with that right now, that's okay. And you'll get there, or you will find your acceptance, is just all what I want to say. I'm just going to this is your time to put some quick chat questions in there. I know that we've left it slightly later than we usually do, just because we've had so much to talk about. I know someone's been asking for some advice on their show, and I'm just going to try and summarize this nice and briefly into a quick question. How would you advise, this is an interesting one, how would you advise the process of advertising the casting of workshops to feel as inclusive as possible? And that's from Ian.
Would you mind just repeating that one more time for me, please, Meg?
I can totally do that. How would you advise the process of advertising the casting of workshops to feel as inclusive as possible? And I'll put that in the chat.
I can, Erin speaking here, I can see that in the chat that Ian has also written, I should say the book writer is neurodiverse, but I as composer am not. Ask your book writer. What does your book writer say? What would make the book writer feel comfortable if they were looking at an advertisement for a job? I think that's the first place to start. If they're not sure, ask someone. For me, I want to know. I'm going to speak very, very personally, very, very briefly. For me, I want to know that you've had training. And I want to see some kind of disclaimer or a statement that you're committed to equitable and inclusive casting, and that means that you will endeavour to meet my access needs in a space, and I am, as a producer or an audition panel, happy to discuss with you how we can meet those needs. Just that can mean the world.
Max speaking. Often in casting breakdowns, when people call for neurodiverse and neurodivergent actors or creatives, it can feel a bit like charity. Just don't come at it with that attitude. Like, it's not an opportunity, it's a job. And if you come at it with that, and you treat people as professionals, and you ask if they want to disclose their specific neurodivergence, they can do that. And then, as Erin said, prove that you can also handle us.
This is JJ speaking. I think that it's just massively important to be welcoming and open to learning. For me personally, just speaking specifically for myself, training is something that not everybody may have had, especially if they're working on something that is lower budget or fringe or a student film, for example, but allowing people to have those sorts of, if they're making those efforts and the research has clearly been done, engaging with them in a way that's as long as you're open and adaptable as a creative team, in your casting breakdown and those sorts of things, have a quick look for the most up-to-date, I'm not going to say the word correct because there is no such thing as correct terminology when it comes to individuals, but the most up-to-date, widely appreciated discourse, to pop that in your casting breakdowns and things as well. And then if somebody says, actually, that's not how I identify, then be open and flexible with that as well.
Meg speaking. I also think this is something that I have encountered once before and I would encourage everyone to do. If you are doing an Arts Council application for a project and you want to do training as part of that, put that in your Arts Council application. Put that in as part of your budget, saying, I would like to use some of this funding to pay for everyone in the casting company to do this training. I did this as part of, this was a trans-specific project, and we'd had both mental health, first aid training, and trans awareness training. And I think it meant that those difficult discussions didn't fall just on the trans people in that company. I think that could be totally applicable to a neurodivergent situation.
Hi, Erin speaking here. There are also lots of creators on social media, Instagram, Twitch, TikTok, and so on, who are doing training. When I say, sorry, I want to be really clear, JJ. Thank you so much for calling me out on it. Yes, not everyone has access to training. When I say training, in my mind, I was referring to things like research and support and resources and that kind of thing. Sorry, training was just kind of a catch-all umbrella term for that, and I apologize. That's not what I meant. Or maybe I mean sort of training yourself, then perhaps instead of like paying a corporation to come into your workplace or your school or whatever. And what was I going to say? Yes, there's plenty of creators who are already doing a lot of resources and having these discussions online. If you look at hashtags like hashtag actually autistic or we shall not be removed, I think are both two really good. Neurodivergent squad or neurodiverse squad is a really good one on Twitter. Just heaps of people who are willing to educate people because out of the kindness of their hearts for free. That being said, don't rely on people to educate you for free. Pay them and donate to their Ko-fis or their PayPals if you can.
Amazing. I think we've answered that one. We haven't had any more questions, but I just wanted to throw in one of my additional questions, which is about what is your favorite piece of representation of something that does a great job of representing neurodivergence, even if it didn't intentionally mean to. This can be because I know there is not necessarily loads of rep out there. What is your favorite kind of neurodivergent rep?
Hi, this is JJ speaking. For me, it's a piece of television that is absolutely, as far as I'm aware, not related to neurodivergence at all, but the world and the way it's written makes complete sense to me and always has done since I was a child, which is the new Netflix adaptation of a series of unfortunate events. But the books always, to me, really spoke to me in my own narrative voice, and I just really enjoyed that world, and it just seems to make sense the way that things are explained and the constant reiteration of things like a word which here means and then an explanation that follows it. And I always just loved that universe, and I don't think that there is any kind of influence there at all for the writer, but I just love it, and it makes me just feel incredibly home and safe and in a world that makes sense. So that would be mine, but as I said, I don't believe it has any direct connection.
Hey, it's Erin speaking here. I have a couple of characters that I love and really identify with, but aren't necessarily specifically neurodivergent, but are very sort of neurodivergently coded, if you like, ND coded, which one of them is Tina from Bob's Burgers. She is my queen and always will be. Or the film Amelie. I always found a lot of representation for myself in Amelie, and also very Annie Mary, who's hopefully going to be adapted into a musical as my second year exercise at BML, which I'm very excited about. Yeah, Welsh autistic coded person in film, very excited. I have to say that podcasts, I think, are such a wonderful resource for people who can't access storytelling in other ways. They can't afford to go to the theatre or the cinema, or they can't afford a Netflix subscription or whatever. And there's such a wonderful community of people in the podcasting industry that also the creators have that added bonus of being able to respond really quickly to their audience base, because they're, you know, what did you think of the latest episode on Twitter? And then people can respond instantly, and then they record, and which is kind of the way that I think theatre should be, really. It's sort of like an ongoing interaction between sort of creator and audience, and sort of a conversation in that way. You'll find a lot of neurodivergent people in podcast fandoms because they're just such a wonderful way to explore and escape and access storytelling in a way that literally means you can just lie flat on your back in bed if you want to. And I can't speak highly of them generally enough.
Max speaking. I have one, and it's a character called Abed Nadir in Community. Now, in the first episode, like, he's outed by one of the main characters called Jeff, and he just goes, "Yeah, well, you have Asperger's," and it's kind of it's a joke throughout the thing. But the writer Dan Harmon is so wonderful at developing characters, and the learning growth pattern that goes throughout Community in every single episode is so fantastic that Abed gets as much of a journey in learning and growth in his personal relationship with his autism as does every character with Abed Nadir's being autistic. So yeah, I'd thoroughly recommend watching Community just for that character, because he is exceptional.
Next speaking, I also have a couple I want to name. There is a great character in She-Ra and the Princess of Power on Netflix, Entraptor, who is so dear to my heart and is like canon autistic, and is wonderful. Some non-canon examples I really love. I just think the whole cast of the whole writing of Gilmore Girls, everyone is like neurodivergent coded in that place, but particularly Rory and Paris. I actually wrote an essay about it. Just they are every interaction they have with each other just screams neurodivergence. And finally, to give it like a musical example, I think Be More Chill is the unintentional but just perfect neurodivergent love story. Like, both those main characters, one of them is canonically has a touch of ADHD, to use quotation marks, but both of the lead characters, the two lead romances, stim, they make vocal tics with each other, and their love story is just kind of really beautifully neurodivergent. I don't know if it was intended, but it's really beautiful. And I think, kind of ending on that note, unless anyone else has anything to add, we're ready to kind of wrap up. I just want to thank you all for coming and watching this, and thank you to my panelists. Now is the time to plug yourselves. So my name is Meg. You can find me at Meg McGrady on Twitter, Instagram, and my website is www.megmcgrady.co.uk, and I do producing, composing, writing on topics such as this. And I'm going to pass to Erin.
Hello, I'm Erin Emphis. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Erin Enfis, and I will put that in the chat as well, because I appreciate that not only is it a not easy name to remember, I also don't pronounce it in the right way in terms of the Welsh way, and I apologise sort of to my ancestors. And you can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Erin Enfis, and I stream there semi-regularly on the themes of inclusivity and musical theatre.
Hi, I'm JJ Green, and my Twitter is at 131JJ, I believe. I think it is. I'm going to double check that and put it in a chat if it's not. I'm an actor and a writer, and you can contact me there, and my email address is linked as well.
And also, just to say briefly, JJ just wrote an amazing play which you can now go buy, Atypical Rainbow.
Yes, you can. It's yes, I should have really thought of bringing that up, which Max did the wonderful composition for as well. So it's kind of both of our both of our thing there, and you can buy that through Amazon or Nick Hearn Books or wherever you'd like to, or the National Theatre Bookshop if you're in London.
I'm Max Alexander Taylor. I'm an actor and composer. You can find me on the socials by typing in my name into Google, Max Alexander Taylor. I don't know how to use technology, so just type into Google. And yeah, I just got off composing a show for JJ, which was fantastic fun. And if you're in the US, come check out The Lion. We're doing The Lion. It's a one-man actor muso show. We just did it at the Southwark Playhouse. And we're doing it in Arizona, in 2 venues in Arizona and Cincinnati, Ohio, from September through to December. So if you're free and you're in the States or fancy a visit, then pop along.
It is a wonderful show and I would really recommend it. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for coming and thank you for stimming with us. And thanks. Goodbye.